December 15, 1945, Arizona Desert, United States. Akiko Tanaka knelt beside the fallen guard, her hands pressed against the spreading crimson stain on his chest. Private James Sullivan's eyes, impossibly blue against his pale face, locked onto hers. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth as he tried to smile that same genuine smile he had given her on her first day in the camp. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the shouting guards and wailing sirens. Good 23 years old, a trained nurse, enemy prisoner of war, Akiko knew exactly what a sucking chest wound meant. She knew what happened when blood came from the mouth. She knew he was dying, and she knew he had stepped between her and that rifle without hesitation. The American she had been taught to hate had taken a bullet meant for her. If stories like this move you, tales from World War II that reveal the stunning complexity of humanity, even in our darkest hours, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether it's Tokyo or Tennessee, Berlin or Brisbane. These stories matter because they show us that even enemies can choose grace, and sometimes that choice costs everything. Akiko had expected death in American captivity. Instead, she found kindness from the least likely source. And when death finally came to the Arizona desert that cold December day, it came for her protector, not for her. In that moment, everything she believed about enemies and honor shattered like glass. The propaganda had been clear and terrifying. Throughout 1944 and early 1945, Japanese military authorities told their personnel that Americans showed no mercy to prisoners. Surrender meant torture, humiliation, and death. Better to die fighting than face capture. Women, especially, were told horrific stories designed to ensure they would take their own lives rather than fall into enemy hands. Akiko Tanaka had believed every word. She had served as an Imperial Army nurse since 1942, working in field hospitals across the Pacific Islands. She had treated wounded soldiers on Saipan, Guam, and finally, Okinawa. She had watched boys barely old enough to shave die from wounds that could have been treated if only they had supplies. By spring 1945, the medical corps had almost nothing: no morphine, no antiseptics, no clean bandages. They boiled rags and reused them. They performed amputations without anesthesia. They watched men die from infections that penicillin could have stopped. When American forces overran Okinawa in June 1945, Akiko expected to die. She had been told that female prisoners were treated worse than livestock. Instead, Marine medics found her hiding in a cave with 3 wounded soldiers. They disarmed her, she carried only medical scissors, and treated her patients. Right there in the cave, American corpsmen administered morphine, dressed wounds properly, and evacuated everyone to a field hospital. The contradiction was so profound that Akiko's mind could not process it. The atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In August, Emperor Hirohito surrendered. The war ended. But for Akiko and 17 other Japanese women nurses, translators, and clerks captured during the final months, the war's end meant only uncertainty. They were transported across the Pacific to internment camps in the American Southwest. The journey took 3 weeks, and every day, Akiko waited for the cruelty to begin. It never did. The ship's crew treated them with distant professionalism. They were fed twice daily rice, vegetables, canned meat. When one woman became seasick, an American nurse brought her ginger tea and sat with her through the night. Akiko watched these small mercies with deep suspicion. The kindness had to be a trick. The real punishment would come later. July 1945. The train carrying the women arrived at the camp in Arizona. The doors rolled open, and blinding desert sunlight poured in. Heat hit Akiko like a physical blow-dry, scorching, utterly foreign. She stepped onto dust-covered ground and looked at the camp before her. Guard towers, barbed wire, wooden barracks, arranged in neat rows. American soldiers with rifles. This was it. This was where the horror would begin. The processing building was cool inside, shaded from the brutal sun. Female guards and medical staff waited. Everything was efficient, organized, almost gentle. "Remove your outer clothing," the Japanese-American translator said. "You'll be given clean garments after medical examination and delousing." Akiko's hands trembled as she undressed. She had worn the same uniform for weeks, sleeping in it, traveling in it. She felt ashamed of her appearance, of the lice she knew crawled in her hair. The medical examination was quick. An American nurse checked her temperature, examined her throat and ears, made notes on a chart. The nurse even smiled slightly when she finished. "Healthy," she said in English, a word Akiko recognized. Then came the showers. She had expected cold water, humiliation, cruelty. Instead, she found individual stalls with hot water. Real soap was placed in her hand, thick white, smelling of lavender. She stood under the stream and felt tears mixing with the water running down her face. For the first time in months, she was clean. Truly clean. The water turned brown at her feet, carrying away dirt and shame. She scrubbed her hair 3 times, working soap into lather, feeling lice wash away. When she emerged, wrapped in a clean towel, new clothes waited: a simple cotton dress, undergarments, socks, canvas shoes. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Thinner than before, sharper cheekbones, but clean, almost human again. The mess hall smelled like food. Real food. Rice, vegetables, meat, coffee. Her stomach cramped with desperate hunger. She took a tray and watched American cooks pilot high-steaming white rice, carrots and green beans, beef and gravy, soft bread with butter, hot coffee, more food than she had seen in a year. She sat with the other women, and for a long moment no one could bring themselves to eat. They simply stared at their trays as if the food might vanish. Akiko took a small bite of rice. Perfect, fluffy, delicious. She closed her eyes and chewed slowly. Around her, other women began to eat. Some cried silently. Mrs. Yoshida, a teacher from Tokyo, set down her fork after 3 bites and pressed her hands to her face. "My daughters are starving," she whispered. "They wrote that they eat grass and tree bark, and here I sit eating beef and rice." The guilt was crushing, but the body demanded sustenance, and so they ate. That night, lying on a real mattress with wool blankets, Akiko stared at the ceiling. Her stomach was full for the first time in memory. Her body was clean. She had a bed, shelter, safety. None of it made sense. Where was the torture? Where was the cruelty? She had been prepared for violence, for death. Instead, she had been given soap and rice and a bed. Mrs. Yoshida's voice drifted up from the bunk below. "Do you think this is real, or are we dead, and this is some strange afterlife?" Akiko had no answer. Days became weeks. The camp settled into routine. Morning bell at 6. Breakfast at 6:30. Oatmeal or eggs. Toast with jam. Coffee. Work assignments followed. Akiko was assigned to the camp infirmary. When staff learned she was a trained nurse, she would work under Captain Reynolds, the camp doctor, treating minor injuries and illnesses. The infirmary had real medical supplies: bandages, antiseptics, morphine. After working in field hospitals with almost nothing, the abundance was overwhelming. Captain Reynolds was thin, serious, professional. He treated Akiko with respect, explaining procedures in simple English, watching to ensure she understood. He never raised his voice, never showed impatience. "You're a good nurse," he told her after her first week. "Your training shows." The compliment caught her off guard. She bowed slightly, unsure how to respond. But it was Private James Sullivan who truly confused her. He was the freckled young guard who had smiled at her on her first day, 21 years old, from a farm in Iowa. He had volunteered for the Army in 1943. He spoke with a soft Midwestern accent and whistled while he walked his rounds. He seemed to appear wherever Akiko was working, not threatening, just present. When he cut his hand on barbed wire during her second week, he came to the infirmary for treatment. "Hello," he said, holding his bleeding hand. "Heard you're the best for this kind of thing." Akiko examined the cut carefully. "Deep but clean. Hurt?" she asked in halting English. "A bit," he admitted, wincing as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic. "But I've had worse. Farm life, you know." She did not fully understand his words, but his tone was conversational. Easy. He did not seem uncomfortable being treated by a Japanese prisoner. She wrapped his hand carefully. "Thank you," he said when she finished. "Good work." He smiled that same simple, then he left. After that, Private Sullivan seemed to be assigned guard duty near the infirmary often. He would nod to Akiko when he saw her. Sometimes he would say good morning in English. Once he tried to say it in Japanese, "Ohayo gozaimasu," but his pronunciation was so mangled that Akiko could not help but smile slightly. He noticed her smile and grinned. "That bad, huh? I'm trying to learn. Not very good at it, though." Small interactions accumulated. Private Sullivan brought her coffee from the mess hall when she worked late. He held doors open for her. Once, when a sudden rainstorm hit and Akiko was caught between buildings, he jogged over with an umbrella and walked her to the barracks without a word. These gestures confused her. Was it pity? Was it some kind of game? She remained guarded, polite, but distant. Letters from home began arriving in the third week. The news was devastating. Tokyo was in ruins. Whole neighborhoods burned to ash. Food was scarce. Families did not know what the future held. Mrs. Yoshida received a letter from her daughter describing how they lived in a shelter made from scraps, eating once a day if they were lucky. "My father's health is poor," the letter said. "Please, if there is any way you can send food, we are desperate." Akiko received her first letter from her mother. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Akiko, we wept with joy to learn you survived. The village has suffered much. Food is scarce, but we manage. Your father works when his strength allows. We pray for your return." Her mother did not beg, but Akiko could read between the lines. Food is scarce meant they were hungry. We manage meant they were barely surviving. That night, Akiko lay in her bunk and thought about the meal she had eaten. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie for dessert. Apple pie, a luxury so absurd, it seemed like a dream. She thought about her parents eating thin rice gruel, if they had rice at all. The guilt was like a weight pressing on her chest. Around the camp, American guards seemed oblivious to the prisoners' inner turmoil. Or perhaps they simply did not understand. But slowly, subtly, something was changing inside Akiko. Each kindness chipped away at the wall she had built around her heart. Each moment of humanity made it harder to maintain her hatred. Captain Reynolds asked her opinion on a patient's treatment, treating her as a colleague. Nurse Patterson shared photographs of her daughter, who was Akiko's age. Private Sullivan shared an orange from his care package, saying simply, "Thought you might like this." She began to see the Americans as individuals. Private Sullivan was not the enemy. He was Jimmy, a farm boy who missed his mother's cooking and wrote letters home every Sunday. These were not monsters. These were people caught in the same war that had caught her. The transformation was painful. If the Americans were truly kind, truly decent, then what did that make the Reich that had told her otherwise? What did it make her for believing? One afternoon in late November, the camp celebrated Thanksgiving. Akiko did not understand the holiday, but the guards had been excited about it for weeks. The camp commandant decided prisoners would be included. A special meal was prepared: roasted turkey, stuffing cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. The mess hall was decorated. Prisoners were invited to eat with guards, all at the same time, no separation. Akiko sat across from Private Sullivan and Corporal Davis. The amount of food on her plate was staggering. She had never seen turkey before. Private Sullivan noticed her hesitation. "It's good," he said, demonstrating by taking a bite. "Try it. This is a real American Thanksgiving." She cut a small piece and tasted it. Tender, flavorful, unlike anything she had eaten. Despite herself, she smiled. "Good?" Private Sullivan asked. "Good," she confirmed. After the meal, walking back to the barracks in the cool evening air, Akiko felt something shift inside her. What she had experienced was not just kindness or unexpected generosity. It was a recognition that transcended nations, uniforms, and victory. These Americans had defeated Japan. They had every reason to be cruel. Instead, they fed their prisoners turkey and pie. They chose dignity over revenge. The answer revealed itself slowly over the following weeks. It was about values, principles, deeper than military victory. The Americans believed in certain ideas about human rights and the treatment of prisoners, and they lived by those principles even when it cost them something. If everything she had believed about the enemy was wrong, what else might be wrong? One by one, the pillars of her worldview began to crumble, and in their place, something new took root. On December 15, 1945, Akiko was assigned to a work detail outside the camp fence. 6 women were sent to clean and reorganize a storage shed a quarter-mile away, supervised by Private Sullivan and Private Wilson. The day was clear and cold, the sky a pale winter blue. Around noon, a civilian truck approached the road leading to the shed. Sullivan stepped forward, expecting a delivery, but the truck was moving too fast. When it stopped abruptly, 2 armed civilians jumped out, shouting, "Jap lovers!" Private Wilson raised his rifle. Sullivan stood his ground, ordering the men to leave. But the older civilian, whose son had died on Iwo Jima, refused. Rage twisted his face. "You protect them while our boys died," he shouted. Sullivan's voice remained steady. "These prisoners are under military protection." Inside the shed, the women froze. Fumiko gripped Akiko's arm. Akiko's fear crystallized. This was the hatred she had expected from the beginning. The older civilian lifted his rifle toward the shed. "They shouldn't have lived when our boys died," he shouted, and fired. Sullivan moved instantly, positioning himself between the gunmen and the women. A second shot struck him in the chest. Blood soaked his uniform as he collapsed. Wilson fired back, wounding the older man, while the younger civilian surrendered. Sirens wailed as guards raced toward them. Akiko ran from the shed and knelt beside Sullivan. Blood poured from his chest, warm and heavy against her hands. "Jimmy, stay with me," she cried. He looked at her, trying to smile through the pain. "You're okay," he whispered. "Good." She begged him not to speak, but she recognized the signs: shallow breaths, blood at the mouth. He was dying. "Tell my mom." "I did my job," he gasped. "Protected innocent people." "You saved us," Akiko sobbed. "You saved me." He reached up, touched her arm with trembling fingers. "Not demons," he whispered, "just people." Then his hand fell, and his chest went still. Private James Sullivan, 21 years old, farm boy from Iowa, died in the Arizona desert, with his head in the lap of the Japanese prisoner he had protected. Akiko's scream tore through the air as guards pulled her away. It was too late. The camp went into lockdown. The 2 civilians were arrested and charged with murder. Headlines read, "POW guard dies, protecting Japanese prisoners." Akiko spent 3 days in the infirmary, unable to eat or sleep. Captain Reynolds stayed with her. "He was a good man," Reynolds said softly. "He did what was right, even when it was hard." "He died for me," Akiko whispered. "Why? Because you weren't the enemy," Reynolds replied. "Not to him." At the funeral, prisoners and guards stood together. Akiko wore a black armband and openly wept. When the chaplain asked if anyone wished to speak, she stepped forward. In halting English, she said that Sullivan had shown her kindness when she expected hate, and that she would carry his sacrifice all her life. She bowed deeply, offering the highest respect her culture allowed. With help from Nurse Patterson, she wrote a letter to Sullivan's mother, telling her that her son had died a hero and that his humanity had changed her forever. In March 1946, returning to Japan, Akiko saw her ruined homeland and understood how completely the war had reshaped the world. She resumed her work as a nurse, later married, raised children, and helped rebuild her nation. But she never forgot Sullivan. His mother sent a photograph of him smiling in front of an Iowa barn, and Akiko kept it for the rest of her life. She told her children and grandchildren about him, the American soldier, who chose compassion over hatred. When Japan and America later became allies, Akiko prayed at memorials for Sullivan's soul. She became a voice for reconciliation, teaching that peace begins when people choose humanity over vengeance. "He showed me," she told her grandson, holding the faded photograph, "that people are not defined by nations or uniforms. We are defined by our choices," and Private Sullivan had chosen to be a hero.